Hey everyone, welcome back to State of the Industry. My name is Chris Gaines, co-founder of The Den, and we have an extremely special episode today. We've got some special guests. We've got our resident blockchain experts, Jason and Svet. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a second, but today we've got some really interesting topics to talk about. We've got a report from Booz Allen Hamilton Innovation Center. We've got Binance in the news again. And we also have just another report on the real power consumption that Bitcoin is causing with proof of work. So before we really hop into it, let's let Daniel and Tamara introduce themselves and what they're doing in the space right now. So.
Hi, my name is Tamara, and I am the community liaison for Burstcoin. I also do a lot of stuff with women in blockchain as far as getting more women speaking and talking about their different projects and getting involved in cryptocurrency. We've taught classes at different places, so we're just pretty much about education and adoption in the blockchain space.
And I'm Daniel. Been around for a while, been in this space probably longer than most, too long to care, 10 years. Programmer, I help teach people on understanding application development, utilizing blockchain correctly, not incorrectly, and also understanding how to integrate into services such as one of the side projects that we worked with and are continuing to work with, the integration with supply chain and things like that. So, continuing education, teaching people how to actually accept cryptocurrency and what that means.
And that's one of the reasons why we love having Daniel at any event that we do is he brings a perspective and a wealth of knowledge that no one else in the space really has.
Historical depth. Because we always living in the moment.
As well as strong opinions and getting stuff across in a way that not many other people I know can. But that's why we love him. So, let's just hop straight into the topics. So first off, let's scroll back up. So we've got a Booz Allen Hamilton Innovation Center, a report that they have titled "Bringing Blockchain into Government: A Path Forward for Creating Effective Federal Blockchain Initiatives." So in some ways, it's interesting to let's see what they have to say about exploring blockchain in the government.
Probably.
Good.
Yeah, I just kind of want to initiate that discussion on that part, which struck me most when I read that report, because probably I wasn't amongst few of the people who actually read the report. And it was 7 projects, which not simply in the consideration of the different government agency, but already in production on different stages. And one of the projects which attracted my attention was, not surprisingly, the project of the Ministry of Defense, which want to use blockchain for, what do you think, for printing supplies to the battlefield. So literally, they don't want to bring anything except probably food to the soldiers. They want to print it right on the spot. And that's actually the reality. They are on the first stage. So I just kind of give you that understanding what government's doing. And there are 6 other projects which we can mention or not, but I'm very curious to know your, Daniel, your Tamara opinion about how blockchain can or cannot be implemented by government and why you think it might make sense if it actually does make sense.
Okay, well, I'll take this one then. So one of the problems is integration of a blockchain into a service, and this is something that I know firsthand experience with, is that once you remove the public validation of peers, you've removed the security. So therefore, at the point in which you've removed the security and you're just keeping a ledger, use a database because it's much faster and much more scalable. Not to mention the response times. Like a lot of people are like, 15-second block time, 8,000 TPS, whatever. That's great. But timeout over TCP is going to give out in 30 seconds, or you're literally going to have a round trip. And most people aren't users, consumers, or not government officials, whatever. They're not going to wait 30 seconds for that stuff to go round trip. Reading is going to be much faster, but again, at that point, use a database. It is much more scalable. when you start talking about using the blockchain for various tactics, including things such as deliverables or keeping track of things, you have to keep in mind that you want to make sure that you scope it correctly. If you need it to be secure, then you need to consider, okay, how am I going to allow people to validate these transactions if I need the blockchain security? Now, if I just need good security, I can use good best practices and operational security measures and perform the same task. People get confused with blockchain and security part, and I hope our government isn't one of those people.
So actually, the way that I see that it could be useful, and I'm kind of disappointed that they're just looking at delivery of other things instead of like weapons, like supply chain. Where are the weapons going? Is anyone selling the weapons in the process? Because a lot of stuff goes missing. So that's something
Even
in
from
which
the government.
government
Especially from the government.
Yes, so that could be one use case. I do work with affordable housing, so it's like waiting lists.
Yeah.
You could put that on the blockchain because then you could have immutable proof that you were in line.
Yeah.
Just like with immigration, we have asylum applications. When did you apply? When did you come in? How can we make it like if anything gets placed retroactively, then you know exactly when this person came in, and there's immutable proof of that.
Yeah.
And like I see those as like actual good use cases
That they should be looking into.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a couple of questions that I think about when I look at this. Is the government, are they actually using semi-public solutions that can be validated? Like, I don't know, based on the report. And B, are they just using this as a way to, dip their toes into the potential, right? Because we know that government agencies move really slowly. I guess it could just be that they're just doing an exploratory deep dive, or just to see what can they do, what are the end solutions, and then maybe they integrate the more of the value, more of the actual specifics that they need to get the most value out of it down the line.
Well, in the report, they listed that there are several things in the pilot stage. So a lot of companies are in pilot stage, and there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, what you have to look at is that if you're piloting a new technology, just like if I was going to roll out a different version of a database or a different version of something, I'm going to run it in parallel with my existing system, and I'm going to run a pilot as if it were in use, but isolated, right?
Yeah.
And what you got to do is you got to determine, is the value add there? Is this more cost effective? Does this provide us a better solution than existing implementations? And honestly, it takes time to determine that, because a lot of people also forget that in a blockchain, you're either reading or writing. And if you're writing, there's a cost.
Yeah.
Is that cost
Worth it?
Yeah, you have to analyze, is the cost per customer use, is that something that's going to scale well for your total overall operational cost, what that looks like versus your income, revenue coming in, things like that. You have to do that math, and it takes a little longer than one day and one little attempt. You're like, oh, this is one quick series of transactions. Oh, this is what it's going to be. No, it takes time, because you don't know what that's going to look like until you have enough series of runs of these pilots to determine that. And that's the TCO I often talk about, total cost of ownership. You got to determine that. Otherwise, you can't just
Test it one day and see what happens. Oh yeah, let's keep it running.
Here's one question which I had when I read the report. It was that at least two of the cases is when the government, different agencies, they try to use blockchain in the acquisition process. Because obviously there are many suppliers to the government, and they try to make the acquisition, as I understood, more transparent. And here's a question. We suppose as citizens to trust government. And if government doesn't trust itself, so creating this blockchain, does it make sense? So what kind of problem we solve? Does government will control itself by letting everybody else to look at their supply chain? Or what do you think about that?
What I think is happening there is going back to the public versus private discussion that we were having prior to this, but I'll fill in everyone. Basically, what I mentioned earlier, the moment you lose the peer validation, you're doing nothing. You're just storing data that's only available to your people. Use a database. Like that's what they're there for. You can use NoSQL if you want to get fancy or something. I mean, it doesn't matter. The reality is that at a point, and even then, if you're storing it on-chain or doing anything with on-chain, you're storing it in transactional data. And you're going to have to retrieve that transactional data just as if you were making a query for a database. So you have to consider all of that, when you're looking at it from just a purely software perspective, this behavior is emulating what this other software is doing. And if I'm not having the security provided by other people validating it, then why am I even doing this? Like, at this point, you're just running an internal service, and there's really no validation because the whole power comes from everyone else being able
That's
to do this.
what I thought, actually.
So I think the perfect use case that I wish I'd seen on this report is political campaign contributions.
And she has brought that up a number of times. She was like, that would be the best thing to
That
do.
is literally, especially in the current political climate, wherever you sit, like the entire country and the world, for that matter, would be much better off if you could, and everyone, that would be easily a public thing. Everyone would want to be in there validating that, making sure that everything is the case. But like where the money is going, who's sending it, that just makes it would remove the veil over this entire
the helping hands, right?
exactly.
Yes.
And I think
that sprinkles happiness all over.
small sprinkles, giant donuts, whatever these guys are
Yes,
doing.
yes, absolutely.
It's like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I just would like to know about it as a very simple addition or clarification to our democratic supposedly system, right?
Well, to go along with that, the budgeting, right? Like it would be great. It would be great to not just fundraising, but also it'd be great to know where our money is going, taxpayers and things like that. To be able to trace that, it would be lovely to determine, hey, what is the government doing buying $30,000 toilet seat? What the fuck is it? Like, I want to know the SKU so I can go find that son of a bitch on Amazon.
No,
I want to test these out, know exactly how good they are.
last night I had the pleasure of sitting at the bar with someone from the planning office from San Jose. So they were going to have a meeting today, and then he was like, "Do you have any questions?" And then I'm like, "I'm full of questions.
How much time do you have?
I am full of questions." And I'm like, "So I have been attending all of this budget meetings and city meetings because I do believe that there are different ways in which the city could use blockchain and cryptocurrency. So I'm like looking at parks, homelessness, and kind of like different ways of using it. But I do see when money's been misused, like in East San Jose, which is what I brought up. They spent, I want to say, about $500 million, and don't quote me because I can be off, to do about a block and a half for a express lane for the bus.
A block and a half.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Give or
It's
take.
like well, it was a big number.
Yeah. And the thing is, like,
Or no, it wasn't.
now the bus stop isn't close to anyone. You have to go way down one way,
So it's not even
or
efficient.
way over the 680. And taxpayers paid that.
And 99% of them don't even know about it.
Exactly. And we don't have parks. We don't have enough like activities for kids. So it's like if we brought like blockchain into something like that, where you as a citizen can keep government in check.
Yeah.
And they can also, I mean, obviously they're going to keep you in check as far as paying taxes, but you will be able to see where your money's actually going.
I think that's huge.
Can I make a note here? Because, it actually, when I arrived here, like already more than 5 years ago, I was absolutely dumbstruck by the misery of the place. And we live in Silicon Valley because of the quality of the roads, because of what you're saying. You cannot find the public transportation. It's absolutely incredible situation with homeless in San Francisco and so on and so forth. So, and then I just suddenly realized that the situation, it can be partially explained, but because we are living not in a democracy, but that's a representative republic. As soon as we start getting their blockchain, it means that we are contradicting the basis of the governance, because governance is supposed to be represented by somebody, and we're saying like, okay, let's put blockchain and we're gonna control you. No, that doesn't work like that. Republic said that there is a representative, you vote once and for a year, 2 years for senators, and that's it. So
Well, yeah. No, so I want to. I agree with you. I want to shift on to the next topic soon. But to that point, I mean, we are a democratic republic, so if we're not
Yeah.
keeping the entire, like the highest end government in check, we are keeping our representatives in check, and you can just as easily use the blockchain system to keep
And,
Exactly.
and I don't think
promises
anybody
are.
wants to spend $500 million on moving a bus express lane.
Well, I don't know. You gotta look at that. It's an atrocity. It's,
Or like selling a portion of San Jose to Google, which is gonna cost the homeless.
and then also happen to own
Input.
property that no one knew about and didn't properly report it, and you're the mayor of the city.
That'd be nice.
Don't that happen?
It'd be nice to be
And
immutable
we
on the chain.
We actually happen, based on me volunteering sometimes, we happen to be at a meeting and he actually asked this person about this.
I asked Sam Licardo about that stuff. I was like, what are you going to do about it? And he was just like, he's like, oh, this some hippie long-haired dude. And I'm like, yeah, so you know that you're going to artificially create a problem with rising rents because of the influx of people. And he was like, yeah, so, I'm going to be doing this thing. And I'm like, no, he's kind of skirted around it.
And then you asked him, how was that going to bring employment to
Yeah.
people from San Jose? Because
Right, it's
essentially
only gonna-
Google's
it's gonna-
just
it's
bringing
the
the
US.
No, Google's coming from Mountain View to here in this case.
That's
It's
the
just
same,
number.
yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, that's still not going to create any more parks anywhere. It's just going to do things around downtown.
It's also only going to just up the rent prices,
Prices
and
of
the
everything.
valuation of
Yeah.
everything, which is going to create further problems and further despair for the people who can't make it now.
And we won't have Patty said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually a much bigger problem than, like, I'm glad we're talking about this. I want to shift on to the next topic, but just to conclude on this, if we were to try to enact like blockchain tracking of some things so that this $500 million gets spent correctly, there's going to be opposition from the companies, the construction companies who love government contracts. They can make as much money as they want, extend it. There's going to be a lot of opposition to something like that.
No. This opposition is not going to come from that. And let me explain what's going to happen. We as taxpayers should have the right to know who got the payment.
100%,
Okay,
yeah.
that should be traceable. However, companies that are contractors are not going to be reporting everything that they're doing internally to
I
that
see what you're
notation and
saying.
ledger.
I see what you're saying.
So that's not going to impact that at all. If anything, that they'll actually just not care. It's only going to impact the
The
people in the
government.
power that sign the paycheck, that sign the checks.
Yeah.
Those are the people that are going to be
Held accountable.
Yeah, and that's where it really matters.
That's a good point.
The way that I actually see it is that contractors are going to want to be using it because they want to show to their insurance company
Yeah.
that they're reliable.
If it's like
And
through
to the government
yeah.
and to
making
the
deadlines
citizens
and-
that they're actually doing what they're supposed to.
Yeah, so
So that's
on
just
the
going to
positive side,
validate
yeah.
what they do.
Pros
So
and-
they're going to want to do that.
Both of them will add one value, but one person's going to be on the skillet, basically. If you sign the check to the wrong people, we're going to fry your ass.
Exactly who to go to. Who's neck to choke. All right, let's head on to the next topic. That's a good one. We can talk more about that later. I actually like that idea. All right, so second topic, talking about Binance. So Binance published a report which might be credited as the first statistical account of an emerging decentralized crypto asset lending industry. We're talking about DeFi, decentralized finance. There's a lot of people trying to get into this space, this idea of DeFi. In fact, we had Jamari Peterson on a few weeks ago, and his project, the Digital Reserve, kind of falls in this category of like decentralized finance. So essentially, let's see. I don't want to lose my place here.
So basically, there is three major Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and another one which combine rose for about like maybe $9 billion in all of the existence. And only in crypto, we have 4 billion only for EOS rose. So the potential of that industry is tremendous. However, paradoxically, but maybe not paradoxically, because of the first comer advantage, like almost 80% of all the credits accumulated on blockchain now in Ethereum. And that's of course because of the maker, which is for about like $400 million, and the rest $40 million. It's was formed during the last 10 months, which actually absolutely dumbstruck me. So in 10 months, we have this absolutely new industry resurging from nothing. and probably Etherland is a company which everybody knows. It's in the back. So what do you think about the future? Will it replace completely of the existing systems? Or?
No, I'll tell you why. So there's some key things that people need to understand. If you're using permissionless chains, meaning that they have no governance layer and you're attempting to do lending, you can't just take it from somewhere. You're not going to be able to do a whole lot. Keep in mind, smart contract execution doesn't say that, hey, if the person has no money, I'm just going to take money that doesn't exist. This has been a problem. Like this is also a number of issues that people fail to understand, is that in a decentralized world, when you start talking about like lending someone money, you have to remember that there has to be a payment model coming back. However, here's the issue that people don't really get. Unlike a cash or unlike banks right now, my direct deposit or your direct deposit or anything else that's going in, you have a line of money that's coming in. In a cryptocurrency environment, depending on what coin it is or what currency you're attempting to use and how it's constructed or how it's obtained, you may not have an influx coming into the person that's being lent to. So if you're trying to do a pure crypto environment, you have to keep that in mind. There's circulation of inbound and outbound.
Yeah.
If you have no inbound and you lent this person and they visibly don't have an inbound, then how are you going to guarantee recoup your payment? You're not. The problem is that we have to figure out how to do that elegantly, but the reality is that once you start looking at decentralized versus centralized, centralization implies that I have somewhere centralized that I can go and pull this from, get my money from as like a vendor or whoever is providing the service to someone as a lender. Now all of a sudden I don't have that. Well, that creates a number of problems because now there's no one going to be paying you back.
So, while I like some of the things that Binance does, the reason why I even got involved with cryptocurrency was about, being your own. Like, you could mine, you could be your own self.
Yeah.
So why would I want to get money?
Get
Why would I want to get a loan?
Yeah.
Why would I even want to do that? I would want to mine and create an ecosystem that actually works for me. It's almost kind of bringing you back to a banking system.
I can tell you why. It's the whole thought of never sell what you can lend. And so there's that mindset. So if you can leverage, if you've been in crypto a long time, like some of us have, you can borrow against that and get whatever. You get your fiat currency and never actually have to sell as long as you make ends meet at the end. But how does that help people that are new into this space?
So where's the value add, on the lending side versus the lendee side, I guess?
The value is on the lender side in the sense of what Jason's talking about. The problem is the lendee will be able to exploit the lender.
Yeah.
And the reason why, and people really don't get this part, so people say smart contracts and they do a lot of things. Actually, we had talked about this last night. One of the problems with smart contracts that people don't get is that they're not that smart. They're literally automatic transactions that are executing on a condition, but the condition is contained with the chain. So if you're dealing with anything on the outside, you can't exactly, it doesn't know about it. So that was one of the things we were talking about last night was literally changing states and how the issuance of state, and but when I'm talking about state 1 or 0, true or false, that kind of thing, you need a Boolean off here if you need to. But basically what I'm describing is the changing of the state of a value of something. So for example, last year we talked about the car smog.
Yeah,
because the state of California has to issue the smog clearance. Once the mechanic or whoever does the smog clearing, that's reported to them. They then publish that. Okay, if you wanted to create a tertiary contract or a way of reading that API into a smart contract, that would be a usable use case. However, problem is that that's a public record and that's easily obtainable. What are you going to start doing when you start talking about banks? And then all of a sudden you start talking about querying a private account. Now all of a sudden you have to worry about dealing with HBAC loading and all this other stuff and tokens and everything else being issued within the contract itself to being able to call a remote API. Now you've just opened up the world to a whole new slew of problems. There's a lot of issues
to take the existing lending system and try to replicate it while maintaining the benefits of decentralization. Yeah.
And this was what he brought up was part of a deeper question that I always bring up whenever there are ICOs that are trying to create a product. And I always tell him, why isn't anyone creating a product that ensures that an ICO meets the expectations of the people, of the investors, and that the investors actually pay the ICO for creating
like a
product.
deliverable and milestone monitoring smart contract for payouts. It's something that she has been talking about. The problem is like just like what I just described. That's the issue, right?
Yeah.
Because how
Like,
are you
how
going
do
to
you measure
verify
it?
without reaching out to
External sources.
outside of the
Yeah.
chain to determine
Yeah.
whether or not the milestone was met, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I told her. Like we talked about it again last night. Was
Yeah,
what,
no, and
how do
it's
we
something
fix
that
that?
I keep on bringing up, but then I'm like, well, at least, you know, if a party doesn't meet an expectation
Yeah.
in different states actually acknowledge blockchain
Well,
as a
then,
notary, then you can actually take them to court.
Yeah.
If-
By the way, when I read it, I thought that we still under appreciate very important problem which we now creating. And that problem is connected to the glorified immutability of the blockchain. Because according to the law, you can be devoid of your assets in case of your criminal behavior, right? And it can be today or it can be in 15 years. But with blockchain, as soon as a record about you getting that credit, paying them back, get into the blockchain, it stays there. There is no possibility theoretically to revert this transaction.
I'm glad you added theoretically.
Come on. I'm talking about the...
Well, actually, even
Wonderful shirts, by the way.
Hold on. The reason I said that, like, keep in mind, I'm not just picking on ETH. I'm not just picking on anyone on this. BCH, literally 2 weeks ago, had a 51% attack to roll back
that's correct.
2 transactions that went to an exchange. So when I say that, I'm glad you added that. I literally mean that because a lot of people fail to keep that in mind, that it is extremely possible to perform such an attack, even on mainstay chains worth, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's still very possible, and it still happens. People have to realize that.
Well, yes, I probably agree for 99% of cases, but I probably will disagree with Bitcoin because
Bitcoin's ever, you're not going to, like, the hashing power is way too high. Not to mention, you have more public peers. So you keep in mind that just because you have a bunch of hashing power doesn't mean shit. If you don't have enough public peers to keep the ledger from rolling back to tell the miners to start reprocessing all those transactions, then you have another problem. So there are 2 types of attack modes on the 51% attack. You have 51% attack through hashing power, and you have a 51% node attack. And a lot of people overlook node attacks. And node attacks are basically, I spin up enough nodes that say that this, my ledger is better. Everyone else's ledger comes into question now. Now all of a sudden, okay, but if there's more that represent that have this, you can call collision attacks and a few other things. Like it's very dangerous. You have
But collision attack will
no, the
lead to
collision
fork.
attack will cause a fork.
It's fork. Yeah.
Hold on. But if you have 51% of the nodes in your control with your ledger, everyone else is going to be bootstrapping off of your peer and pulling from your data. You've rewrote the ledger. You didn't even need to worry about the rest of it. You didn't need the hashing power. You just rewrote the ledger on the node.
I remember you were
Now the
talking
miners
about-
will have to process it. However, they will all start validating it because everyone else is validating it and
That's not.
acceptance is
I
true.
think that's not would be necessarily the case because
That's how it works, actually. So when you do the hashing power and you revert
Yes.
a transaction, everyone has to process it, okay? And what happens is, if it would have been a valid transaction anyway, like if you were pulling one off or instead of sending it to address A, you sent to address B, it would still work because it was still value there. You're not doing a double spend. You're just changing the
Changing the ledger
destination
itself, yeah.
of the transaction. So literally there was coins there, it could go to the other one, so that means it's a valid transaction. So therefore the miners would be told process, and they're going to say, oh, well, they have the value. It was legitimate.
I think there is one case, we always think about that theoretical. There is like somebody taking hold of more than 51% of node and they organize this attack without nobody knowing that that attack is going on. But what if it is, I think that it's unrealistic. So a realistic case is, for example, what CZ brought into the discussion, like when it was attacked $40 million and
He
so
was
on.
talking about using a node rollback. That's
Exactly.
what they're going to do.
But remember how much backlash he received immediately.
But there's a reason he received
You
backlash.
even
Is
said something.
the reason he's receiving backlash is because there's a huge difference between theft and destroying of a chain. Keep in mind, Bitcoin has already rolled back one time. People
Yeah, that's
talk
true,
about
that's true.
BOI.
2009.
No, 2010.
Oh, 2010,
yeah,
I'm
but
sorry.
that transaction had to be rolled back completely. That is, it's still there. That block is still there, but that transaction's not there, and people forget about that. That's hugely important because what the difference is that had to save the network. Otherwise, Bitcoin would be dead. This is just someone that screwed up with their operational security,
like-
and someone took it. This is the same kind of shit that people want. This is like the dowel problem, okay? And I'm going to be honest with you. It literally was someone screwed up, someone lost some money, and then they're like, oh, well, we're going to try to roll it back. Difference is that unlike Ethereum, where they had a foundation of people that could actually kind of steer in that way, Bitcoin is completely in the context of whoever wants to write code and support it and do whatever they want to do. That's what they do. Now, he could have attempted an attack, but the attempt of the attack would have had to have done that way first, and they would have had to have timed it, because keep in mind it was a multi-layer transaction. So if you wanted to roll something like that back, you would have to make sure that A to B, C to D, E to F, and G to A, all of these references are all encapsulated and have valid funds to be able to make sure you could roll it back. Because at any point, if you attempted to roll back and the transaction and pieces were not matching up, it's going to fail.
But there is another problem. You have to still kind of keeping this catch game, because chain is going to be growing. So you don't have to you have to roll not one block, but at least 100 blocks.
Yeah, of course.
Which create that problem of the consistency. You have to keep like a month-long process of organizing all the nodes, keeping like an opposite time direction, and I don't think it's possible.
It's possible if you take a look at it from this standpoint. What happened with the 51% attack on BCH should show you that it's possible. Keep in mind it's using the same hashing, same everything. Yeah. Literally, the only difference is 80 TPS. I mean, you church it up however you want to. That's it. So if you look at it like that, and they can do it on BCH, they can do it on BTC. It is extremely possible, but you have to understand, like I said, you have to do your due diligence in the sense that if I wanted to not send to the exchange, but there was a transaction there, I have to still put that I'm sending the transaction somewhere else that's a valid address, and it would have been a valid address in general. Doesn't have to necessarily be a valid address at the time, because it doesn't matter. All the keys are already predetermined anyway based on the math. So you would have to send. And that's the only way you would be able to defer that. Like when you roll back a transaction, when you roll it back, you're not rolling it back in the sense of not making the transaction. You're rolling it back, changing the destination, because that's the only way it's going to go through.
Yeah.
By the way,
Yeah,
it should
that's
be and this is not financial.
Yeah, I'm not a financial advisor at all. I'm not. Look, just because I'm wearing a 2600 shirt doesn't mean I'm encouraging you to go out and attempt to perform node attacks and or transaction reversals, that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure you gave that disclaimer.
Quiet.
So at least
I'm always
to wrap that topic back up, is there any like conclusion based on talking about DeFi that we can kind of draw from this point moving forward? Like,
it's early stages. It's going to take right now the space itself is learning how to deal with things outside of the chains themselves. And as the evolution of software and foreign function interfacing and things like that start getting implemented into the chains, and then you start seeing things related to foreign ABIs and like being able to deal with things that are outside, and then also being able to make external API calls, what you'll start to see then is you'll start seeing it progress very quickly. However, you still have the problem of in and out, and that is unless they're getting paid in crypto, there's no way of effectively being able to leverage against the lending in crypto.
Because if there's nothing there, then there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But, like when you explained it to me, I was like, this is like a payday loan? It just feels that way to me. It just feels cheap.
Yeah. I mean, we did have a good discussion with Jamari and his approach to it. I think he's trying to take a slightly different approach than Binance. But I don't want to dive too deep into that.
Yeah, I was about to say Binance just had to tell everybody in the U.S. fuck off. So
Yeah. Binance
So are we even going to have any exchanges here now?
Well, yeah, we said Betrax. Well, there's still a lot of U.S.-based exchanges. The regulatory commission is they want their share. Okay,
that's the primary thing.
They want their cut. I tweeted about that yesterday. They want their money.
Actually, that's an excellent point, because they're receiving 0.01% of all transactions. That's what you're getting. So thank you for mentioning that. They're struggling for their money.
Yeah.
It's not because they wanted to suppress us. No.
They want their money.
They want their money, yeah.
All right, let's go on to the third topic. I know you have some specific thoughts on proof of work, energy consumption, and everything, as we all do. So basically, there was a report that came out from MIT, and then they're basically saying they're looking at the energy consumption of Bitcoin. From November 2018, basically. And they're saying that the power consumption sits between 35 and 72 terawatt hours. I've never even heard the term terawatt, which sounds insane. Gigawatt, no, terawatt. So yeah, that already sounds insane. And their CO2 is between 22 and 22 megatons of CO2. Which is between the levels produced by Jordan and Sri Lanka. So again, we've all heard about these levels before. Country levels worth of emissions and energy consumption. And at the same time, researchers recognize that compared to the global annual energy demand of about 1,300 these
mega
terabyte.
So it's just like so much bigger than these 30 terabytes. So
Well,
that's
okay. Let's just turn this into a discussion on energy usage, the value of proof of work, and other solutions.
So I'm going to say this, and then I'll let you guys start off. One of the things I want to bring out is that it is hard to do a deterministic study to determine, like, to get real values of this. And I'll explain why. China, it's no mining farm is going to literally tell them something. So they're not going to tell them how much power they're actually using to run the facilities and stuff. Yeah, sure, you can do the math for the ASICs. You can determine it based on the hash power. But what about the cooling required for the ASICs? The facilitation. Yeah, there's a lot more involved when you start talking about large-scale mining than just the power used to turn the ASICs on. You have a whole list of problems, not to mention the staffing people that are there, because there are people that are there 24/7, because you have to watch it, because I don't know if you've ever ran an ASIC, they sometimes go offline and sometimes fuck up.
Yeah.
And because there's software and hardware, that's what they do, it happens. It's a circuit. It's bound to. I mean, it's created by someone, eventually everything breaks.
Yeah.
I got a question. I want to be like this advocate of the dark force.
Devil's advocate. Yeah.
The devil's advocate.
We were on Star Wars last.
He wants to join
That's a good Al Pacino film, by the way. Devil's Advocate is a really good Al Pacino
yeah.
film. Yeah.
I want to be both dark side and devil. So here's a question. We spend so much energy on another unproductive, obviously task, for example, producing all this huge military complex, doing something else. So what's wrong with Bitcoin taking some part from these, like if you think about the pie as a consumption of electricity, yes, and we took like a small slice from these other unproductive users and put it in more productive than other users. What's wrong with that?
Because the whole idea is that you want to do better for the future generations. Why are you trying to consume more? Like, you should find other solutions.
I have an answer to that. Because 80%, according to that study, 80% of all the consumption goes from renewable.
I call it BS, and I'll tell you why.
Talking about China, right?
Yeah. Hold on. Let's talk about renewable energy. Like, sometimes we overlook the ecological impact of renewable energy. Say you want to create a giant mining farm in this country that you can get the government to agree to allow you to dam a river to do so. What is the ecological impact, the actual impact that created? Yeah, so what? You just renewed energy. You just extinct 42 species and literally introduced a water problem to the people that are downstream. Yeah. So was it renewable? Well, yeah, sure, the electricity can be renewed, but is it renewable as a way of scalably being able to effectively present this as a renewable energy topic? No, because of destruction.
Yeah, the impact can be translated to different avenues.
I'm just rushing to discussion, but we already built this then. Because I know what you're talking about, these huge Chinese projects where just like
No, I was referring to the new one that they're building right now for a mining farm that's going to literally endanger a couple of new species and extinct and stuff. So it's because money buys the ability to destroy to destroy ecosystems
Yeah.
so that people can profit. And we get that. That happens every day. Look at Amazon, look at all these other companies. Data centers are a thing. And I get that. I used to work in them all the time. The difference that you're running into now is that it's hard to place a value on the exact amount of actual renewable energy that's being used versus what is being told as renewable energy. Then you also have this other problem, which is how many of these people are actually telling the truth about what they're doing and where the power's coming from. Because I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of places that say, oh yeah, we're using solar. They're not actually using solar. Yeah, just because you got solar panels on your house, I mean, shit, you're selling that power back to the power company, but you're still on the grid.
Yeah.
Unless you're actually completely off the grid, and in which case you have battery backs and all this other stuff, and it's a much different operation. And I've seen those, like there's a Burst mining farm, storagemining.io. They run an entirely purely solar array in
How
Lithuania.
many petabytes?
Right now,
11?
yeah, they run 11 petabytes off complete solar. And, I can send you a picture of the array and everything like that, but it's completely solar.
Yeah.
Like the whole house is powered by solar. They're not on the grid at all. And it's pretty impressive when you see that. And especially when you see their uptime. But see, that's the other thing a lot of people don't get is that with these renewable energy, Amazon uses a lot of renewable energy. But you know what? They got 85 data centers.
Yeah.
Okay, how many of them are using renewable energy?
What
6.
percentage of that?
Yeah,
is
so going back to West Feathers, you start looking at Visa. Visa is a global company. Visa has data centers everywhere. So does PayPal and all these others, and every one of them are having servers crunching and doing math of some sort. Whether or not it's proof of work is irrelevant. It's still performing computational tasks.
Yep.
That has an effect on the environment. That has an effect on the energy construction that we were talking about. Where's the value, right? Burstcoin does it with hard drives, mining with hard drives, and that's effective for low power input. But you also have to consider at scale, what's that world going to look like if you were to scale the number of hashing power? What is it? I think 800 quintillion right now is the hash rate of Bitcoin. I think it's actually over that now. It's a new ATH last night. So if you're talking about over 800 quintillion hashes per second being generated worldwide, okay, what does that look like in the number of generated outputs for the plots that are needed? What's that space look like? I mean, do we know that? No, we don't. Do we know what, is staking the right model for that? Well, that introduces centralization and trust systems, which again goes back to the idea of the sovereignty and whether or not you want a sovereignty. And then again, going back to what we were talking about, whether or not the lending stuff's going to work on the sovereignty. So you have this real chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
And it's not just that, but also the security issue.
Correct.
With
It's
energy
the
consumption.
trifecta, right?
Because if you're mining, then let's pretend that you're in Venezuela, Argentina, or somewhere where you have difficult conditions with your government.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everybody's hungry, everybody's starving, and someone finds out that you're spending too much electricity. Why are you spending too much electricity? Obviously mining, then you get robbed or whatever happens. It's like personal security. That's why you don't want to continue to mine and spend that kind of energy. And that's kind of also why I'm very much about Burst.
Yeah. So
I think we probably have here some kind of maybe arguments between two types of economy, because there is this classical consumer-based economy, and then there is this emerging model of the sustainable economy, which is on opposite side. On the consumer side, the more we spend, the better, right? The more we spend, the more we start printing money, the more people eating hamburgers, the more people receive salaries, working program, and so on and so forth. And that was basically our cornerstone the last maybe already 100 years of the economy. Now, when we say, oh, maybe it's not working, now we start shifting our mentality to the sustainable economies. And there probably your argument came into, right? Because you're saying that we shouldn't do that. We should reverse to say a Burstcoin type of mining, which is less concentrated, but more oriented on sustainability. Am I correct?
No, not just that. Let me walk you through this. So one of the things she was talking about, and I also wrote an article about this last year. Okay, you take somewhere where they're monitoring power, they're literally looking at everything. Burstcoin allows for someone to participate in a economics system that their government may have failed them to allow them to participate in. And I mean this by saying Zimbabwe dollar and the Bolivia and all this other stuff. You can't spend that money outside the country. But a cryptocurrency and say, oh, well, why not mine Bitcoin? Well, that power issue and the operational security involved with that. Well, guess what? Oh, well, Burst isn't worth that much. Well, great. But guess what? You can mine it, transfer it, or use it to buy stuff so that someone else can use it to pay for a service on the internet and things like that. People forget that you do multiple things in a day to get what you need to get done anyway. If you have to, as a person trying to survive or a person trying to not participate in your government's economic system because they have failed you horribly and continue to fail you, then you have no choice but to understand the tools that are there. And the problem is educating people on the fact that just because you mine Burstcoin on a hard drive doesn't mean that you can't turn around and turn it into Bitcoin if you needed to buy something that's only sold with Bitcoin. And that is ultimately one of the problems that people fail to get, is that in the world of cryptocurrencies, you're going to have states, digitized, nomadic worlds of people who believe in certain types of technologies, certain consensuses, certain beliefs, and they will utilize that technology the way that they need to perform the tasks that they need to do. That will be payment processing, smart contracts for various tasks, DApps, whatever those people want, whatever it is that they need. That's the fruit of the innovation. The problem is that people on crypto Twitter and shit are just like, buy Bitcoin. Okay, well, guess what? Nobody accepts my country's money.
Yeah.
But see, like, here's the thing. Like, right now, like, I know people that they're, like, in Colombia, and they're going to the border with Venezuela, and they're giving people cryptocurrency, or so that people can actually buy food and things. And the fact that a third world country can figure out how to use cryptocurrency more than people in the United States, it's like it's based on need.
Yeah, well, that's it. It's based on need. Like the 99% of people in the U.S. don't feel that same need that. Like,
yes,
some
they're
people
not. They're not hungry. They're not desperate.
It's not the same.
Yeah.
It's how can I increase my wealth
Yes.
as opposed to how can I eat food tomorrow.
But it's a
Yes.
byproduct of the government, of the United States government and the U.S. dollar being what it is, and the ability to spend it almost anywhere.
Yeah.
Other countries, you can say, yeah, I have this. Yeah, they'll pay the exchange fee. They'll take it. Problem is that what happens when you're on the other side of that, where no one wants your country's money.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, you know, the value add of like using counter ops and understanding that, yeah, sure, I can mine with proof of work, but then I'm painting a fucking target on my hand. Okay, so I use Burstcoin. Great, I may not make as much mining wise. However, I'm able to participate in the global economic system with lower impact for my wallet to even get it. Because first of all, nobody even looks at hard drives when you buy them on Amazon. If you bought a hard drive versus buying a high-end GPU, and you're a government agent and you've seen someone bought that, you're going to go to the guy who had the high-end GPU because chances are they're probably mining. Person with a hard drive probably storing photos, and really, that's probably
No, the thing
Normal
what
computing.
we always talk about is like, if people start buying hard drives, then Western Digital and Seagate are gonna get pretty excited.
Oh,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I mean, it's gonna be a telltale.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, like one of the biggest problems is like someone about the 51% attack, right? Someone had asked, could someone 51% attack burst? Rico from the POCC had once did a review of that, and some other people verified, and we did some other checks. And basically, you would know if someone was attempting to do it, because it's not the fact that it takes so much power to attack the burst network. It takes time because you have to plot the drives. You have to plot all of them, and you can't plot them
Remember
without
when
them
we
being
were
in
at the
succession,
bank?
because otherwise you're overwriting the same
Remember.
plots and you're reading the same, so it's not going to provide you any extra value of capacity because it's going to be the same plot. And so literally someone has to have the time to do it. But also, like we talked about, Western Digital would have an amazing, or Seagate, or someone's going to post an amazing couple of quarters, and you would be able to determine that because the sales would go up, and you'd be like, there we go.
And the beauty of it is we would know right away because they're all here.
They're right in their backyard.
But see, that's kind of the point, right? Like, people can use market indicators for various things, but in countries such as Venezuela and Colombia and others, and even in Asia and Africa, right? Like they don't have power. Okay, great. Kenya. Oh, hey, mine Bitcoin. Okay, great. I can't keep the fucking lights on, but you're gonna ask me to mine Bitcoin with an ASIC that's using 1,700 kilowatt hour or 1,700 watts. Okay, how's that going to work out for keeping the street lights on for when people get home from work and they're walking home, they don't end up getting killed by animals or the civil war that's constantly going on outside their own country and all this stuff. You have all of these things that in the U.S. we don't think about because, or most of Europe, you don't
worry about
have to
those
think about.
things.
It's a different mindset, which also shows why some people they're very dead set on proof of work and like damn the energy costs, like this is the best way to do it, versus looking for more sustainable. Like I feel like the natural part of technological progression is to shoot for efficiency, right? You have top end power, you have speed, and then you have like the efficiency at which you reach those highest goals.
Correct.
And I think now is about as good a time as any for people to be focusing more on how can we get the same amount of value out of it, but be in a much more efficient way, especially when we're talking about global warming and climate change and accessibility to people. Power is such a thing we don't think about in like the U.S. and Europe, but in other places that value of having access to cryptocurrencies, if that's a barrier to entry, then we need to start focusing more on ways to reduce total energy consumption. Yeah.
But when you start talking like proof of work, right? In the early days, right, it was very easy to mine. Okay, like pretty much if you were mining, and by the way, there was no mining pools, just so you kids don't know what that's about. But the idea of solo mining, that was a thing, and people don't even understand that today. You ask someone, are you solo mining or pool mining? They're like, huh? There's another type? You're like, yeah, I can actually submit myself to the network to propose for the block, like to the answer, and they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, it's not very profitable because you don't get anything unless you win. But if you win, you get everything. The whole block, all the transaction fees, plus the coins. And they're like, that sounds crazy. And I'm like, yeah, that's how it was. It was like last year or 2 years ago, some guy won a block on a Raspberry Pi. But I've been running for years. But
awesome.
But you have to keep in mind that it's a snowball's chance in hell.
Yeah.
So you really, because of the quintillions worth of thing, you're competing against all of them. But in a mining pool, the reason people use the pools is because of ROI. It's forecastable. They can determine it.
Yeah.
But the problem is that proof of work in Bitcoin in its current state, at 7 TPS, at the amount of electrical usage for processing, one could contend that it's not even near as efficient as what Visa could ever is, period.
Yeah.
Just because of the fact of the throughput. Now, that's not talking about processing and validating, okay? Let's also not get that mistaken, because Visa doesn't validate the transaction you send immediately.
Right.
They actually issue a credit issuance, and then they process it over a period of 48 hours, 36 hours, whatever, or 72 hours is the max. And that's what they do. A lot of people have that misunderstood too. They think that when you stick your card in, you press the button, then that money immediately changed hands. Let me inform you. Next time you go to anywhere, use your debit card. Log into your banking app. You're going to see this wonderful thing that says processing.
Yep.
Okay, that's called an unconfirmed transaction in a mempool.
I remember we were talking to our
And you actually can see it in your bank statements if you go there.
Remember how you were saying that? So yesterday we were riding with an investment
Banker from Citibank, and we were talking about Bitcoin.
And you
I was
explained
comparing it, and he was like, well, no, it's different. I'm like, no, it's not. So let me explain to you. Because, first of all, I submit a transaction to Bitcoin, it goes to the mempool, and it's unconfirmed. And I was like, so if you look at your banking app, when you use debit card, it's processing. When it's done, it's cemented into there. You get a transaction ID. When your ledger's done in a bank, it does this thing. Wow. I'm like, yeah, it's amazing that distributed ledger supported by proof of work or proof of whatever to sustain that's what it's for. That's why it's there. It's a financial system. They emulate each other because they are there. But the thing is that proof of work doesn't scale well in the sense of how it was implemented and the difficulty changes that occur based on the number of miners and the number of hashers or the number of people that are actually mining. The problem that you run into though is that it costs money to run the miners, and that's all they do. They're pure business, and that's fine. That's Satoshi also was like, yeah, there will be businesses that will be just to do this. The thing that's funny is that they cut the power off all the time. They do all these other things, but are they running nodes to keep the actual ledger up? No, nodes are only being ran by individuals that choose to believe in this stuff. And the problem is miners don't give two shits about anything. Whether the transaction was rolled back or not, they don't care.
They want their ROI.
Yeah.
That's it.
As long as they get the transaction fee for that block.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. You need me to roll that back? I don't really care. It's like they get an alert that says you're processing this block or this block. That's it. I mean, honestly. And so what you run into at scale or proof of work, and going back to what she was saying, in countries where you're not in America and you're not in a first world country and you're a second, third world, or even worse, you're in isolation, even in these countries. People also forget, man, the majority of America, the middle of the country, actually doesn't have high-speed internet. Yeah. There are a lot of places in Nebraska and other places that are dial-up only, and the reason why is because there's no cables. Like you can.
People still use AOL.
Yeah, people still use AOL. No, not kidding. That people still pay.
What was the number?
There's like 25 million active monthly subscribers still pay for dial-up internet and still use it. So people often think that the U.S. Here in California,
We're so used to
Yeah.
commodities.
California, we're a bubble within a bubble within a bubble within another bubble, and then as soon as you go to the center, well, actually, Bay Area isn't that.
As soon as you
Just a few miles out of there.
As soon as you get on I-5 or you get anywhere else, all of a sudden you start realizing, it's much different.
As soon as you lose reception,
Then it sets in, yeah. But we mock that, but let's consider that if that is considered low end of a first world nation, okay, what type of resources are going to be available on the other side of that spectrum, on the third world side, and what types of tools are they working with? And that's why there's still internet cafes. That's why there's still a lot of these things.
And why would we expect them to mine Bitcoin?
Yeah, why would you expect them to mine something? They can't even keep the lights on
But actually, with regards to third world, I don't think we completely on the same page here because
Let's wrap this segment up with this last.
Exactly because of the absence of any other infrastructure, they started to build all of these cellular towers like crazy. If you go to the statistics and look at how quickly like countries like Tanzania or Botswana started to become like 90% of the people online.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm thinking that America is behind already because of the old.
It's a different growth. It's a different growth path.
It's a different technology. It's like old technology now started to delay new technologies,
Well,
and
you
that's
also-
an inevitability.
You also have a problem though with cellular being the predominant way that they access the internet. It's not a consistent speed. So they also have a problem with population density versus the number of users that are associated to the receivers and broadcaster towers. So you have a number of problems.
That's correct. There is
That
some
that,
trade-offs.
that are trade-offs. So yeah, sure, 90% of your people may have access to the internet, but do they have access enough to be submitting shares or submitting answers to a mining property?
But regarding mining, I agree with you. But regarding this paying, for example, like in Kenya, they use like mobile credits to pay, and it's
they
allocated
use
like 70% of their economy. That's amazing. Through 5 years, this what's the name of the coin? But anyway, they moved to this. It's like 70% of all GDP. It's amazing.
And in some places, it's actually even safer to use things like Bitcoin, because like whenever you send money through Western Union and things like that, people will get robbed right outside.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's true.
so
That's true.
so like again, people learn based on their need. You know, it's like just like surviving, like, you know.
It's a great point.
I want to add one thing to that before you wanted to wrap up. So on that same side, if they don't have an ecosystem, say for example, you're sending money to someone like these people doing the airdrops to Venezuela and stuff and all these other things, keep in mind that they have to convert that to some form of currency
Usable.
on their side. Hold on. That marks them as a target because keep in mind there are only a limited number of those ATMs, and there's only a limited number of facilities that they can use that stuff in. So literally, government agencies and stuff like that are going to be watching, and operational security is then called into question because now If the governments are smart, they can actually use that as a model to start oppressing those people who are choosing to reach outside of their shortcomings of their own government.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of being able to mine.
Yes. Because that's the power to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we just went super deep into this, which is actually exactly what I wanted. Like, I'm having to process our entire discussion.
And I thought I was gonna have a hard time.
No, it's the complete opposite. This is good. I'm hoping that the listeners are getting a ton out of everything that's been said so
All
far.
of our 10 listeners.
Well, I mean, the thing is what I've been learning a lot recently dealing with, because I don't do a whole lot of interview stuff, but whenever I do them, people are always asking me to do more.
Yeah.
The problem is that I feel that, when I say stuff, people miss, and when they don't really understand the concepts of, why people like me are involved and ever got involved in this stuff, we didn't get into it for money. It was never about money. And, I mean, literally, I can make more money dealing with my day-to-day business by working at startups, all this other stuff. I have Bitcoins. That's not my problem. My problem is teaching people how to actually use this stuff, and then also teaching people who are who can't be reached to teach this stuff, in hopes of inspiring someone to be like, hey, you know what? I know a language that I can translate this to, and give these people a guide on how to do this shit. Yeah. Because there's a lot of stuff that people fail to really understand how dangerous it is once you're in a world that's not necessarily Fremont, California. And that's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and you're completely right. At the end of the day, it really comes back to education. People
and
need to understand.
I will also say this much. She has always pushed me to do more on the education side. She was the one that, got me started teaching with the Women Who Code and doing the classes and things like that. And, at first I was I was hesitant. I didn't want to do it. And then, I learned real quick. I learned real quick that it was not necessarily for them, but more for myself.
Yeah.
And it became a learning experience. But one of the things that I got the pleasure of seeing was the failure that we as a community in the crypto space have presented ourselves. We have a huge egg on our face, and no one's to blame but us. Greed took over, and it took everything, derailed it. Yep. Oh, we got adoption with these apps you can use, but no one's using the fucking coins because everybody's trying to make money. I mean, that's the truth. God's honest truth. Ken Bozak went to Consensus. By the way, I talked about this on almost thing, but Ken Bozak was the only one that had paid for this one auction thing with Bitcoin at Consensus. He is the only one that had done it. Now that says a lot, because that means that even the big names, the big people who are involved in this space are not using coins. And you have to have circulation, because if you don't have circulation, no distribution, it starts to become very centralized into a handful of people who control the majority of it.
And circulation is very different from volume.
Yes. Circulation is not volume. Volume is something that's artificially created. Keep coins listed on exchanges. You're welcome.
Can keep myself from saying greed is good because it gives us circulation.
Look, greed can be good. Greed can be good, but what greed has done right now has literally invited the U.S. regulatories to come in and start slapping people.
That's a wrong type of greed.
Yeah.
But we were also able to pay for a conference.
Yeah, of course.
For
Blockchain Northwest, we paid for that with Burst. Community fundraised. That and those are rare though, because
it's not the norm; it's the exception almost, right?
And that's ridiculous. Justin Wu, hardworking guy. He takes crypto for his conferences, but a lot of these big conferences don't even accept Bitcoin to pay for the tickets.
Don't even think about it.
Or they take BitPay.
Yeah, they take BitPay.
You can pay through.
It's a gray area.
Might as well use Visa. PayPal, actually, that way you can get your money back. Fuck BitPay. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that?
All right, I think we'll end it there. We just went through so much stuff. I'm gonna have to sleep on everything that we just
and I have so many questions. Let's stop it here.
Yeah, so let's stop it here. Do you guys have any announcements? Anything that you wanted to make?
Yeah.
So to follow you.
So I was gonna say. New Phoenix wallet came out. Hot Wallet just launched a new version, much faster. You should check it out for Burstcoin. Block Talk is being worked on by JJoss. He has an NFT asset on the testnet right now. Feel free to go take a look at it. I think there's a couple of games that are coming out built around the NFTs that are on there. And then I'm still actively working on my projects. Clear as that, a few gateway projects for some exchanges, things like that. Busy. And it's a lot, not just me, but everyone. Harry and them are prepping for 2.4.0 is on the testnet, so you should check that out. It eliminates a few negative pieces, but it fixes a few bugs, and then it introduces a few streamlining functions, and then from there, there's going to be a lot of other changes coming out with like the way the autonomous transactions, i.e. smart contracts work. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and Switch Sunday.
Oh yeah, and then every Sunday we do our meetup in San Jose, Patty's Inn, 102 South Montgomery. You should come there, drink.
Before Google takes
And
over.
where?
Pattison. It's 102 South
okay.
Montgomery.
Yeah, it's just everybody comes there.
I
Some
thought
people
it was
present,
Action
some
Spot.
people just go there to drink.
Oh,
It's
no,
just
Action
it's
Spot's
a
on
nerd hangout.
Wednesdays. Yeah, and there's the...
Yeah, Action Spot on Wednesdays. We're there usually, and then we're pretty easy to find.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you
Pretty
guys.
easy to spot.
You can't miss me. I mean, if you do, you should probably get glasses. I mean, I'm 6'4". I'm a big dude.
Yeah, well, I want to say thank you guys very much for
Thank you.
coming
Thank you for
on.
having us.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
this was
Great.
awesome. Jason, any announcements?
Not this week. We'll have some soon though.
Set?
Well, you know where to find me. Telegram, ask Svet about crypto. And I got a Daniel Buzzway there, so you can ask your question to Daniel. I'm sorry, I'm chilling a little bit.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
Like Daniel Jones.
Yeah. If you contact me, use my name in quotes, please. Thank Quake Telegraph for that.
all right. Yeah. And on my end, the Den, as always, we've got classes coming up. Check out our website, www.theden.io. We've got data structs for coding interviews. We've got our Blockchain for Developers class, and we also have our Hyperledger for Developers class. We also have some more stuff, more interesting stuff in the works coming out for people who might not be able to take our classes in person very soon. So keep an eye out on our socials and on our website, and keep an eye out on the podcast. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. We want to interact with you guys, so I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have to say. With that, this has been State of the Industry. I'm Chris Gaines, and we'll see you guys next time.